Well, hi once again. Thanks for being here with us. I really appreciate you joining us. And we have a wonderful guest today on Unstoppable Mindset, Samantha Rawlinson, who's been a nurse for 30 years, has done a lot dealing with especially women's issues. And she's going to talk to us about chronic illness and chronic kinds of issues and nursing things. And she's going to tell her life story as well. My gosh, that'll take us a while, right? Anyways, Samantha, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here. And I should tell everyone, I met Samantha through the Podapalooza program. We've talked about that a number of times before, and we've gotten some really wonderful interviews out of that. And I know we're going to have another one today. So welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start as usual. Can you just tell us a little about you, maybe your life story growing up or anything like that that you think we should know, and anything we shouldn't know? You can add that in if you want.
Okay. Well, I think people will be surprised to know that I have wanted to be a nurse since I was 9 years old. And school was not always easy for me. So it was a journey. But I did it, and I'm very proud of myself that I was able to do that. As for how I got to where I'm at right now, is I actually had a back injury back in 2001, and working as a nurse, which is very common working as a nurse. I can't tell you how many back injuries there are.
Is that because you have to lean over a lot and so on?
Exactly. And that's exactly what mine was. It was leaning over. It wasn't even picking something up. And after it happened, I went to physical therapy. And about a month later, I was in a car accident, and it felt better the next day. And so fast forward to 2005, and we had just moved in. So my back hurt in a specific area. It wasn't like it was lower back pain. I knew it was this specific injury because it was in the scapular area. So it's not an area you really injure very often. And since then, from 2005 on, I have tried everything out there. And I basically got sick of the traditional healthcare system and took things into my own hands. And during all of that, I've tried everything from traditional medicine to over-the-counter medicine, and even some of the woo-woo stuff is what some of the people are calling it nowadays, the energy healing and that type of thing. And I really, truly believe a lot of that does work. But what really got me here was, I'd say 3 years ago, 2020, literally January 1st, I watched the Game Changer show on Netflix and learned how bad heart disease was, and how eating animals, how bad it is for our hearts and for diabetes. And I literally stopped eating meat the next day. So during COVID, I learned how to eat vegan. My daughter already was, and that's where my real journey began, with trying to fix my back pain and trying to prevent heart disease, was how I was eating. I learned how to meditate. I learned how to do what they call emotional freedom technique. It's also called tapping and journaling. And I had an epiphany that I wanted to teach women how to take control of their life and how to take control of their chronic illness, because it can be done.
Obviously, being a woman, you're going to focus on women. I appreciate that. But do you help men as well, or why do you focus specifically on women?
Why I chose women was because women do not realize it. Heart disease is the number one killer in women in the United States, and it's often overlooked in women. Whereas men, we see it, and with women, it occurs like a lot later than it does in men. So it's overlooked and kind of pushed aside. And I really thought it was important to teach women to take control of their health and to look for the signs and symptoms.
But I just want to follow through on it, because I am just curious more than anything else. Don't men basically behave the same way?
Yes and no. Their symptoms are different. They tend to have things checked out. They don't overlook certain health problems like women do, that like chest pain to them, they're going to go check. Women are like, oh, I'm anxious. They kind of brush it under the rug. And so to your other question, yes, I will help men. My focus is women, but I'm not going to turn anybody around. If they want to fix themselves, I will definitely help.
The reason I kind of ask about men is that I hear, the whole concept of men are macho and they kind of ignore things a lot of times too. And that's why I asked the question. But what you're saying is, typically speaking, and maybe it's because of all the publicity and all of the visibility it's gotten, men have been a little bit more programmed to check it out. But it just seems to me there are a lot of men that also tend to ignore things because they're supposed to be tough.
Yeah, I think with men, it is very obvious when they're having a cardiac event. It's really pronounced, whereas women, they don't get it as pronounced as a man would. It's subtle, it's quiet, and they don't always catch it.
So what happens when let's say you're having a heart attack, a cardiac event with women, as opposed to what we typically see with men and so on? So
with people don't realize this, but a lot of times pain in your left shoulder can be a sign of a heart attack. And we disregard it as, oh, I hurt myself, or, also indigestion is another one. And that goes for men too.
Yeah.
Men are working on that one. They'll push it aside and take all these Tums and all these antacids. And here they've been having mini heart attacks for who knows how long.
Yeah. And the antacids haven't helped, and they just think, oh, they're not really helping all that much. But as you said, something else is really going on.
Right. And they don't check it out.
Well, in general, so you're talking about heart disease and so on, but what overall is the whole concept of chronic illness?
So that's a very good question. So chronic illness is typically a long-term condition that it doesn't always have a cure. It's something that lasts more than 3 months. So chronic pain can be a chronic illness, because if it doesn't go away, it's something that's with you. So it's chronic. Mm-hmm. A lot of times chronic illnesses can be, I think I already said, controlled, but not cured. But and sometimes they can be reversed depending on what the chronic illness is. A lot of times chronic illness is inflammation in the body. And once we treat that inflammation, sometimes we can actually either reverse or at least control that chronic illness.
How is Western medicine overall at dealing with chronic illness? I've interviewed a number of people on Unstoppable Mindset and a number through Podapalooza who talk a lot about how they've also embraced some of the precepts and concepts of Eastern medicine that made a whole lot more of a difference than Western medicine in dealing with theirs and other people's issues.
Well, I think we tend to give too much medication, and then you have side effects from that medication. So you give more medication, and that seems to be the fix. Whereas we're not, in all fairness to doctors, they don't have the time because of the way our system is set up. But nutrition and meditation, mindset can make a huge difference in controlling a lot of illnesses. Nutrition alone can reverse things and control a lot of what you have.
So talking about meditation and so on brings up the whole concept of stress and just dealing with our mental well-being and so on. And I would presume that if we could work to cut back stress and put it in perspective, as opposed to letting everything stress us out, that ought to help a lot as well.
Oh my gosh, yes, it would. So it's interesting that you bring up stress, because I just read I guess not a survey, but a article. Carnegie Mellon University discovered there's a link between chronic psychological stress and the body's ability to regulate inflammatory responses. So that being said, the body responds to stress, and not all stress is bad. I know it sounds crazy, and there is a YouTube video, and I wish I would have looked it up for you, on this lady who used to talk about how terrible stress was for you, and then she has totally reversed her take on it, because some stress can be good. It's when you let all those stressors add up, and they build and build and build, and you don't take care of them. That's when they become bad.
A lot of what I see when I discuss stress and talk about stress, and also experience it, although I try to work on this, what I see is that stress is mostly, at least in the beginning, self-imposed. We worry about so many things. We don't stop, and going back to meditation, we don't meditate. We don't take time at the end of the day to look at the day and analyze what happened and say to ourselves, gee, this happened that wasn't great. Rather than beating ourselves up over it, how do we improve it in the future? We don't deal with mindfulness, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. And so as a result, we promote the stress.
Yeah, yes, I agree with that totally. I think we don't take time to stop and take care of ourselves, and self-care is so important. And like you said, at the end of the day, it can be something as simple as watching the sunset, or journaling, reading a book, doing something for you. In this society right now, I think we are always on the go, and we go all day till we collapse.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have been using guide dogs since I was 14. And one of the things that I've learned about having 8 dogs, both lab and golden retrievers, is that they can be very stoic. They can put up with an awful lot, and you never know anything is wrong until they drop. They will work till they drop. They're that committed. And clearly, the stress that we experience doesn't tend to be with dogs, and maybe there's something to be learned from that. The other side of it is that they don't necessarily easily tell us when they're feeling not well. And so we get surprised when suddenly they can't work anymore. And I think that's true of a lot of dogs. I had one dog that in 1996, we moved to New Jersey, and she was bit by a tick in probably it had to be in spring of 1997. And 2 years later, we had flown to Southern California for a meeting and came back, and came in on Saturday, and she was, she seemed fine, but Saturday night she couldn't even get up and come down to eat dinner. And we learned that what happened is that she had contracted Lyme's disease that morphed into glomerulonephritis. And so literally she was starving to death because the kidneys were passing out all the good stuff along with the bad stuff. She had to retire, but gave no real clue. And there had to be some symptoms or some things that she was feeling, but she was so focused on pleasing and working that she never really gave us an indication of it. And so they don't deal with stress the same way we do by any means, and there are pluses and minuses to that.
That is so true.
And so the thing that we have or ought to develop is the ability to analyze and become more aware of us and our surroundings and what goes on inside of us, which is, I think, what you're really saying.
Yes. And even during the day, if we learn the tools to help us even throughout the day, for one, recognizing, hey, I am stressed right now, pull yourself out of that situation and just do a simple breathing technique. Breathe in for 4, out for 4. And taking that time can decrease your stress enough to be like, okay, I've recognized this. I feel better. I can continue. We just let it build and build to the point that we get sick.
As much as anything, dealing with stress is a conscious kind of a process. and we can deal with most stress. It's like fear, and I'm in the process of writing a book about fear, because having survived being in the World Trade Center on September 11th, I've talked about fear a lot, but what I've never really done is taught people some of the techniques that I have learned throughout the years, and that I learned unexpectedly about dealing with September 11th. And so when the terrorists attacked, I was able to focus, because I had developed a mindset that told me that I knew what to do in an emergency if there was the ability to do it, as opposed to if the building wasn't crashing down around us, which wouldn't have mattered anyway then. But the fact is that you can control fear, and fear can be a good thing. It's all about how you choose to deal with it. And I think that's so true, whether it's fear or stress, which are related. It is all about what you choose to do about it and how you choose to prepare to live from day to day.
It is. That is so true, because your mindset can really, it just can make your day good or bad.
But that is a choice that you can make no matter what's going on.
Oh, exactly. But people have lived in that stressful state for so long, they don't know how to reverse it and how to get back to a normalized state. And I know for me that I learned that during COVID, whereas a lot of people were panicked, I actually embraced it and learned a lot about myself and how I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, and COVID is a perfect example of a time when so many people went into a fear response because they had to experience an unexpected life change and didn't have any control over it. And our problem also is we think we have to control everything. And so as a result, we don't deal with things very well.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. And it's funny because I'm somebody who's always wanting to control things. And over the last few years, I've just there's still aspects of my life I want some control over, but I've learned to just relax. And if things happen, I can't control everything. I'm not going to make myself sick over it.
Right. It's important to learn what you can control and what you can't control, and don't worry about what you can't control, because it's only going to cause you, here we go again, stress and fear.
Exactly. And the other big thing that I love to tell people, I learned this probably, way too late for one, but I learned this when my kids were a little bit older, is to learn to say no. Because I would do anything that came my way. I'm like, yes, I'll do that. And I was always involved in their school stuff. And at one point I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm making myself tired. And you have to know when to say no.
Mm-hmm. And you've got to take time for you too.
Right.
Do you go to church or do anything in the religious world?
I don't go to church. I journal. I'm more spiritual, and I love my morning nature time. I like to sit outside in the morning and just connect with nature.
The reason I asked the question is that you probably then wouldn't be familiar with a program that the Methodist Church began called the Walk to Emmaus, which is an outgrowth of a Catholic program called Crescio. It's a short course in Christianity intended to develop people who are Christian into Christian leaders. It's a program not to indoctrinate, if you will, or to bring somebody into a church, but to help develop leadership. The program is a 4-day program where you go to a place, and a number of other people go who have never been on this, as the Methodists call it, Walk to Emmaus before. And it's called a Walk to Emmaus because if you've read the Bible, there's a time after Jesus arose from the grave where he walked on the road to Emmaus and met some people. They didn't know who he was, and he went with them to Emmaus. And they sat down to eat, and it was at that point that suddenly he revealed himself and they realized who he was and he disappeared. So this is a journey to, if you will, Emmaus. And what they do when you get there is they take your watch and they tell you right at the outset, you don't have to worry about anything here. You don't have control. You don't need control. Everything is taken care of. If you have any questions or concerns, you can ask, but we're telling you now that everything will be done that needs to be done. Even your families have people checking in on them. You don't have to worry about having control over anything. So I went on the walk, and then later I was a director of one of the walks. And it's interesting to observe the people who couldn't let go. And it's even more interesting to observe the people who really could let go and embraced it, and how they progressed, Christianity or not, how they progressed in their own lives because they learned that they really could let go of so many things.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a very powerful program. It is a really cool program. And the whole idea is that you trust, you learn to trust. And we have so many challenges with trust. Well, I went to that program in, I think it was 1991. And it was a challenge at first to give up my watch because I'm used to looking at my watch and the time. I don't need to do that, but I like to just keep tabs on things. It's like if I had to shut down and not use a computer for a day, I could do it. And I know there are a lot of people who can't. And like I realized fairly quickly, yeah, I don't need my watch. I'm not going to worry about it. They said, don't worry about it. I'm going to try it. And it was really a great experience all the way around.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who would not be able to get through that.
Well, you remember the device, the BlackBerry?
Yeah.
And Research in Motion one day lost their servers and lost communications with BlackBerries. And I think it was like about 12 hours, BlackBerries didn't work. And I understand that, and this was fortunately more at night, but I understand that even some people committed suicide because they didn't have access to their BlackBerries.
What? That is crazy.
We get so locked into doing things a certain way that we don't work on figuring out alternatives. I have been a member of the National Federation of the Blind for many years. It's the largest consumer organization of blind people. And a gentleman named Dr. Jonathan Lazar, who worked at the time at Towson University, came and spoke to the Federation and said, one of the interesting things that he has found about blind people who interact with the internet is that blind people tend to be a little bit more patient and a little bit more persistent about dealing with the net, especially when things aren't working quite right, because we're so used to not having full access that we, in fact, will work harder at trying to get access. And if we can't, we can't, but we do that. And I think it's changing as the internet becomes more accessible, but it is interesting how many of us recognize that we don't have the same access to computer information that other people do. And while it's frustrating, we can control our mindset about that, and we go on and we look for other ways to get the data.
Right.
But when I hear about kids in the back seat of their parents' cars texting each other rather than talking, I know sometimes they don't want their parents to hear what they're saying, but gee, aren't we taking things to a limit or beyond a limit? So
yeah, that's for sure.
It's an interesting, evolving world. So how does chronic illness affect people's lives? What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's got something that maybe they discover, or how do they discover that if they have a chronic illness?
So people with chronic illnesses, I'm trying to figure out what part of that to answer first. So I'm going to start with just listing a few chronic illnesses. That way the listeners know kind of what I'm talking about when it affects their life. And things that are listed under chronic illness. And this is just a few, there's a lot. Obesity, heart disease, diabetes, irritable bowel syndrome, that can be very debilitating for some people, fatty liver disease, and chronic pain. And those are just a few. There's a lot more than that. These people that have these chronic illnesses, they are on a roller coaster. They can feel guilty because they haven't been taking care of themselves. They're distressed, they're hopeless, they're frustrated, anxious, angry, and depressed. So they can go through all these emotions in one day when they're not feeling well. Individuals who have chronic illness also have to face the worry of money, because they have all these doctor's appointments and medications and time off from work. So they're dealing with a lot of emotional, physical, and social issues having a chronic illness. So they have days where they just can't get out of bed. They have day when they're feeling good, they feel great, and then they wake up the next day and they're like, well, what did I do yesterday to feel so bad? And it depends on the chronic illness. An example of diabetes, these people have to watch their glucose levels on a constant basis. They have to be very consistent with their diet and exercise. When they don't and they slack off, their chronic illness gets out of control. So it can affect your life in so many ways. And somebody who has a chronic illness knows what I'm talking about.
What is the best thing that people can do in general to, if they do have a chronic illness, what's the best thing for them just normally to do about it?
For one, get your nutrition under control. Which is a hard one especially here in the US. We are very bad about picking something up and eating it. Nutrition, exercise, your mindset can make a huge difference. Your lifestyle, sleeping, we already talked about stress. All these things all work together, and we are really bad about not regulating them all.
One of the things that we tend to do when we feel, it seems to me anyway, when we feel that something is bothering us, is that we kind of go onto our shells. We don't move. We don't do anything. That doesn't seem like it's a very healthy thing to do either.
No, it is a terrible thing to do. And I'll be quite honest, just because I'm a health coach doesn't mean I'm perfect. On days that I'm having pain, I have to physically remind myself. And I'll have my husband tell me, okay, you need to walk, you need to go stretch. I may not feel like it, but I know I have to do it, because if I don't, I'm just going to be in more pain. And when you're in the midst of that chronic illness, you need that support system, or you need a way of learning how to cope. And the emotional freedom technique, it's also called tapping. That is one thing that has really helped me. But movement is very important, whether it's exercising if you're able to, because exercise is good for us. It decreases our chances of having heart disease. Strength training, especially for women. And when I mean strength training, I don't mean you have to go and lift a huge amount of weights. Light weights on a daily basis are really important, especially for women, because women over 50 during menopause get osteoporosis. So strength training is really important. And then everybody needs to do flexibility. And that's just stretching, and yoga helps with that significantly, because you can find on YouTube just light yoga things for anybody.
Tell me more about tapping, if you would, please.
Yeah. So now I'm not a practitioner, but it's something I discovered right around the COVID time. And what you do is you tap on meridians, and your meridians go through your body, and the places you tap are like your head, your eyebrow, the side of your eye, under your nose, under your chin, and your collarbone. And your meridians run all along these lines. And with tapping, you start with the negative and you go through these tapping points and talk through the points of all the negativity that you're dealing with right now. And then you go back through the points and you talk about the positive and bring the positive around. And I can't tell you how much it has helped me with pain, because it can bring my pain level from an 8 down to a 4 in one session.
That's pretty dramatic.
It really is.
Why does that happen?
Our bodies have energy. We have energy all around us. And this is something that I think we need to look more and more into. The Eastern medicine really looks into does this type of stuff more than we do here. And energy healing is a real thing. It helps. And when you put that positive energy into it, it just, it turns things around for you. And you can use tapping for anything. You can use it for anxiety, depression, having a bad day. I'm just trying to think of some of the things. You can use it for anything. You name it, you can use it.
It's all about, it seems to me, once again, redirecting what is going on in your mind. And it's getting you to refocus and deal with, again, stress or whatever is happening, or the illness, and taking away from the negative aspects of it. So it's all about a mental adjustment, it seems to me.
It is. And it's hard to change your mentality all on your own. I know, because I've really worked on it, and I work on it every single day.
Yeah. And it's, again, all about what we're taught. How do we start to get our overall environment to change the way we deal with stress and all of these things, to make some of this go away? And that is, I guess, what I'm getting at is, collectively, we're teaching ourselves to be so stressed and to be so frustrated and to have so many challenges. How do we deal with that?
I think we need to, as human beings, we need to come to that point of, okay, enough is enough. I've had it. I need to either learn how to do this on my own or find somebody who can teach me, because we all get to a breaking point that we just can't do it anymore.
So growing up, though, you've got children. How do you help your children maybe start out not going down that same path of negativity and stress?
Teaching them from the very beginning, which is very hard. If you're somebody who's already in that space and are able to learn this at an early age, teaching them at an early age is also very important. I've always been in the self-discovery since I was in my 20s. And so both my children have always kind of been in the same thing. One of my children has anxiety very badly, and she does a lot of these things to help control her anxiety. And it's not it's a hormonal anxiety. It's something she inherited. So you can learn these things, but you have to want to learn them. And so as a parent, I would teach my children them, because you're giving them an advantage.
How's that been working for you with your children?
My oldest child, she's 25. And let me tell you, she is far better at this because she's learned it from an early age.
Far better at it than you, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But that's because, I was able to figure it out and go, oh, okay, I don't want to do this. And I didn't want to teach my kids. And Do they have bad days? Yes, we all have bad days, but I know she's able to control hers. My younger child, who's 20, she's still working on it.
Yeah. It still comes down to how we allow our surroundings, our environments to affect us. And it sounds like your older daughter has accepted the fact that we can deal with this a little bit more. And your younger one, it sounds like, is still sort of not totally to the point of saying, I can separate myself from a lot of this materialistic stuff.
Right. She's still maturing and she's in college, which makes it hard to do that separation.
Yeah. It is one of those things that again is all about choice. We choose to do it or we choose not to. And that is up entirely to us.
It really is.
So you mentioned movement before and you mentioned exercise. Is there a difference between just movement in dealing with chronic illness and exercise?
So yes, there is. So we are bad, especially right now, because a lot of us are on Zoom calls. A lot of us work from home or work, even people who work in an office. We're bad about sitting at a desk for 8 hours. That's a long time for your body to sit. Movement, you need to get up and move. And I don't mean you have to go run for 30 minutes. I mean, every hour you need to get up and move your body. I don't care if it's walking down to the bathroom or walking outside for 5 minutes. We really should be moving on an hourly basis to keep the body moving because it prevents you, it helps your body from getting stiff. It keeps you flexible and it just keeps you healthy.
I will say my Apple Watch yells at me because even when I get up to 4,000 or 4,500 steps, it says you don't take enough steps, which is probably true. But I do believe in moving around and I do mainly work at home and from home. And right now, especially, my wife has been dealing with some medical issues with a serious wound from probably a pressure sore in her wheelchair. And it got so serious that it actually went to the bone. And so she was in the hospital for a month. So I keep close eye on her and we have caregivers that are now helping. But still, moving around is important because as I've heard a number of times over the years, people in talking about caregivers and family members who are caregivers, you've got to take time for you too, because if you don't, you're not going to be a good caregiver and you're going to eventually have your own serious issues.
That is so true. Caregivers are the worst about taking care of themselves, as are nurses, because we're caregivers.
Yes.
Yeah.
By any standard, you are.
Yeah.
And COVID, again, and we talked about it earlier, has offered challenges, but it has offered opportunities. And I think there's a lot to be learned from doing more work in doing Zoom calls, doing Zoom meetings. We're finding out that you don't have to necessarily be in the office for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that you can, and there's a lot of potential in being more productive by having time to work at home. But you also have to be disciplined enough to take advantage of the opportunities that brings you.
That is so true.
So it is a major issue that a lot of us have to learn to give ourselves permission to make choices. And maybe that's the real issue, is that we don't choose because we don't give ourselves permission to make choices. Right.
That is so true. And we don't give ourselves permission to make the right choices.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, the easier route is supposedly the better, but I don't know where we got into that because it's not always better.
Tell me more if you would.
Well, for instance, food. That, we think, oh, it's so easy just to run to the store and get this and this, and I don't have to make dinner. And I had that mentality, and I realized, oh my gosh, I can make a meal in 30 minutes, a healthy meal in 30 minutes. Whereas running to the store, getting the food, coming home, that was 30 minutes right there.
Yeah.
And when I cook at home, I spend like a fraction of what I would going out. And especially right now with the economy, I think that's a big thing.
We used to not go out a lot, but we would use Grubhub or especially during the pandemic, and we would get stuff maybe twice a week. But now we don't, especially with Karen, my wife, being the way she is. She doesn't get up much, or she doesn't certainly go out, and we're eating just fine, thank you very much, without going out, without even ordering in from Grubhub or other services. And there are a lot of things available, but the fact of the matter is that we can produce things at home, and we can be a lot more creative. And it also gives us the time in being creative and being industrious enough to do things at home. It gives us the time to do something that allows us to get away from stress too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's days I don't feel like cooking, but then I have leftovers and I'm like, hey, I can just throw this together. And I just try to keep the certain foods in my fridge all the time. And once you stop eating things like fried food, you don't want to eat it because it doesn't taste good.
Yeah. It's been not very hard for us to not eat a lot of fried food. Yeah. And we got an air fryer earlier this year, so that makes the concept of fried food better.
I know. I love my air fryer. So little side note here, my husband is a travel nurse, and we are sometimes in a hotel for weeks on end. We've lived in a hotel for 3 months at one point, and their little kitchenette stuff is to be desired, let me just say. I have learned how to cook everything out of an air fryer. I've even learned how to make cookies out of an air fryer.
So do you take your air fryer with you to the hotel?
Oh, yes.
Good for you.
Yes, I do. So I've learned how to make a lot of different things in the air fryer. It's kind of comical.
Well, we have one of these, the air fryer that has a lot of different functions. I have not made cookies. I've been given gifts of cookies that are frozen that they're partially baked, and you put them in, and they've come out really well. But I use it for a lot of stuff. Yeah. And there's an Accessibility customer. Accessibility is the company that I work for. It's a company that makes products that make websites more accessible. And through Accessibility, I discovered a company called Wild Grain. And we did a podcast with the owner of Wild Grain. They make breads, specifically sourdough breads and very healthy kinds of breads. Ooh, they cool. Started at the beginning or near the beginning of the pandemic. It's wildgrain.com. And so they ship nationwide. And the way they actually do it is they create the breads, they par-bake them, they send them to you frozen, and then you put them in the oven and finish the baking. And they're wonderful because the breads come out fresh. And again, it's also completely healthy, no preservatives compared to other kinds of things. And I have found using the air fryer to create them and to bake them has been a wonderful tool. And it saves them energy too.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited. I wrote that down. I'm excited. I'm going to check that out.
It's great. It's a wonderful place. And it's absolutely worth exploring and getting their stuff from. In fact, we've got to do an order a little bit later in the month.
Yeah. And actually, sourdough bread is actually really good for you. Sourdough bread, whole grain or whole wheat are the three I tell people to look for.
We haven't bought straight white bread for a long time. We get whole grain bread, or now we're really spoiled by the sourdough. And so we get that, and their dinner rolls are wonderful. I haven't tried, in the first box we got, they sent us some sticky buns, and I haven't tried them yet. I've got to do that. But I haven't found anything there that we really didn't like at all. It's absolutely scrumptious stuff.
I'm going to check it out because I love having avocado toast and sourdough. That's like one of my favorite breakfasts.
Now, where are you located?
Right now, I'm in Tennessee. I'm originally, my husband and I are from Texas. Well, he's from Texas, but yeah, we're in Nashville right now.
Well, the neat thing about Wild Grain is what they have done is partnered with bakeries all over the country. So they've given bakeries their recipes and they're under contract so that the food is prepared much closer to you than Boston, where Wild Grain is located, and it's shipped from the closest bakery to wherever you are. So that also helps.
Okay, awesome.
And if you go back and look at all of our podcasts, you can find it, and you can find the interview with him and learn his whole story. It's a fascinating story.
Wow, I'm going to do that. Thank you.
One of the things that I wonder about is we've talked a lot about food. What are good foods and not necessarily so good foods for dealing with chronic illness?
So the foods you want to avoid are foods that cause inflammation. So we might as well start with the bad, right? So red meat and processed meats they're very inflammatory, and they really can cause somebody with chronic illnesses a lot of problems. So I would totally avoid those. Refined grains, white bread, white rice, white pasta. You can get whole wheat pasta now, so that would be a better choice. Sodas, and it doesn't matter if it's sweetened or unsweetened. I just actually read something with diabetics that unsweetened sodas can actually cause their blood sugars to spike hours later, which I had no idea. And then fried foods. So those are the things you really want to avoid. There's a lot you can eat that are anti-inflammatory. Of course, most of your fruits and vegetables are very good for you. Fatty fishes like a salmon, trout, tuna, and talk about an anti-inflammatory meal. You can take your, a fish like salmon or trout or tuna and put it on a whole wheat tortilla and add your veggies on it, and you have a whole anti-inflammatory dinner or lunch right there. So it's super easy to eat that way. There's a lot of herbs and spices that you can use. Avoid salt at all costs. I think here in the US, we're really bad about not using spices and herbs, and they can make such a difference in your meal.
Yeah.
And then I really recommend staying away from the vegetable oils. Do things like olive oil, avocado oil. Those are so much better for you. And then nuts and seeds are really that's an amazing source of not only protein, but they're anti-inflammatory and a great snack.
Yeah, I know that I have not used a lot. I've never used a lot of salt. Sometimes I oversalt by accident, and I notice it, and I notice it a lot. You can't go completely in your life without salt, but you can certainly determine how much you need. My brother was a big salt eater, and I know that wasn't necessarily a good thing to do at all, but it still happened.
Yeah, my husband's terrible with the salt. I'm like, can you at least taste it before you salt it?
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, yeah, so you need enough salt for cooking, but
right.
Now, on the other hand, the exception to that rule is popcorn at a movie theater, but that's another story.
Yeah. Well, as long as you're not eating it every day, and popcorn is actually one of my most favorite snacks. I just don't put butter on it, and I do put salt, but not a lot.
Yeah, we don't eat that much popcorn, not as much as we should. But the point is that we don't as a result, have a lot of butter on it. But that's pretty cool.
And actually, you know what you can do at home? You can put nutritional yeast. You can sprinkle that on it, and it tastes like cheese on it.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's very good for you.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I would assume that sleep is also something that can help with chronic illness and in general. I mean, the things that we're talking about are not just things that work for dealing with chronic illness, but things that give you a better life and help you anyway.
Exactly. And these things prevent you from getting a chronic illness. So it's important that you start doing these things before you get to that point that you have something that now you have to control. So, yes, sleep is so important for so many reasons. Your body really needs that rest. It needs 6 to 8 hours of sleep. And these people who say, all I need is 4 hours of sleep, I'm sorry that you can tell yourself that, but your body needs it.
Yeah.
And
I like 8 hours of sleep.
Oh, same here. I know when I don't get sleep, I'm not a nice person. So sleep is very important to me. And I know people have a hard time either falling asleep or staying asleep. And with that, I suggest make sure you have a good nighttime routine. Turn out the lights. I like to read before bed. So I just don't use a bright light, or on my Kindle, I turn it to that dark level. So the eye reduction isn't whatever they call that, doesn't disturb me. And just have something that relaxes you that you could do before bed. If you have a lot going through your head, keep a pad of paper or a journal right there at your bed and write things down. That way you can get it off your mind and be able to relax and to sleep.
Have you written any books or done any writing to make all of this more widely available to people?
I have not. I'm
something
pretty
to
new
work
at
on.
this. Yeah, I'm pretty new at this, but yes, something to work on.
Something definitely to do. Well, I would gather. So today, are you still nursing, or what do you do with your world?
So I am now full-time health and wellness coach, helping women, but helping anybody at that point. If I can help them change their mindset and change their negative behaviors into positive behaviors, I find that it's a success. So no, I'm not working in a hospital or anything like that, but I'm using nursing in a different way right now.
Well, if people want to learn about you and maybe take advantage of your skills and your services, how do they do that?
I actually have a website. It's SamanthaRawlinson.com. Can
you spell, please?
Yes, it's SamanthaRawlinson.com.
Okay.
And all my information's on there. My Facebook group is on there. I think that Instagram's on there. Not that I really get on Instagram anymore. That's become more of a hassle. And yeah, and my email's on there also. And on my website, there's a place where you can it's a direct link to make an appointment for a free 30-minute call just to see if I can help you.
You have people all over that you work with, clients all over?
Yes.
Great. Well, I really appreciate all of the knowledge and the insights that you've given us. And I hope that you who are listening out there appreciate them as well. I'm sticking with wild grain and good sourdough bread, but that's another story. And I would suggest, though, that anyone who wants to reach out to Samantha, please do so. I don't think we really talked a lot about the fact that I don't know whether I even mentioned it at first, that we met Samantha through Podapalooza. Again, Podapalooza is a fun program. And
it is.
You have to start a podcast, Samantha.
I guess I do.
Well, thanks again, Samantha, for joining us. And thank you for listening. We really appreciate all of you being here. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. Please reach out to me via email at michaelhi, michaelhi, at accessibe, accessibe.com, or visit our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson is MichaelHingson. We love to hear your comments and your thoughts, and we certainly ask that you please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to the podcast. But let us know your thoughts. And if you know of anyone else, including yourself, who might want to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, please reach out to me via email. I'd love to hear from you. Once more, thanks for listening, and we hope to see you again next time.